Welcome to White Pill Radio, the roughly every other episode version of Theology on Air, which is an outgrowth of Theology by the Pint, which is a monthly gathering in Houston around craft beer where we talk about really interesting theological and philosophical and moral and even political issues, all in good fun. You can learn more by going to theologybythepint.org, which we want you to do.
Yep.
But this is a post-apologetic, ultimately hopeful, applied theology show that looks at super current events from a Christian point of view. I like to say that this is blessed talk, but not happy talk. Yeah, so no superficial nonsense here, which you may have had your fill of if you've been following politics the last couple of weeks. So we actually want to have substantive conversations about substantive issues, and I'm going to do my best. I did say to Ken that I don't always do a good job of, putting a white pill at the end of this sort of thing, but we're going to do our best to do that. Unlike yesterday, because apparently she had other things to do. We are joined today by the Grand Poobah of Theology by the Pint, none other than Sarah Stone.
Hey, guys.
So glad to have you. So this was one of those weeks where we put out a feeler and it's like, hey, who can do this week? And almost nobody could. We could never get three people in the room at the same time. So we said, all right, forget it. We're going to do one just on econ because there's so many economics kind of issues going on with these campaign promises, and we're going to get free houses, and cornflakes are only going to cost $1 a box. The future is amazing. Also, grocery stores won't have any food in them. But other than that, the future is going to be amazing. But then there are still cultural issues we wanted to talk about. So this is a two-parter. It's going to be 2 episodes, White Pill Radio, episode 25 in 2 parts.
First part, economics. I skated out of that one, and I get to just talk about culture, which is awesome.
And so basically it's like Christmas around here. Like, it's just raining episodes. So,
but Evan has opinions about everything, so you get to be on all of them.
Okay. theologybythepint.org.
Yeah.
Donate.
Go there.
Help us out.
And we have a lot of really fun stuff coming up. In fact, in September, we have our annual fundraiser, but our fundraisers are cool and fun. And there's like pub trivia and beer tasting and games, and you can make your own t-shirt. And anyway, it's a vibe. So come for that. In October, we're doing 2 political, like faith and politics events. One is a little bit more pointed, like who should I vote for? The other one's like, how should I even think about voting as a Christian? One of them is in town. One of them is up at the Woodlands, our very first Woodlands, the Woodlands. You have to say I've been told. And then in November, we're talking about gender and identity. And then December, we're just going to have a free-for-all, Wild West, ask any questions, stump the panel. It'll be great. So we have lots of fun things coming up. I know that sounds very like commercially, but I'm actually super excited about all of these.
Yes. So. They are, since COVID and all that, like the in-person events, there's not as many of them. And I think when people come to our events, they really do have a lot of fun. They're glad they left their house and didn't just spend another night doom scrolling or watching
fun YouTube. Fact. The other night we did our follow-up conversation. So we do like a week after our big events, we have a follow-up for people that still have lingering questions. And those are great. And we split into a couple different groups. We had professors at each table. It was actually really, really great. And I mean, I learned some stuff. But I put pens and slips of papers out on the table. And one of the pens, you get a pen that says something and then years later you're like, oh, I remember where I got that pen. The pen was from the wedding reception of 2 people who met at Theology on Tap, which is what we used to be called, and got married. And they're not the ones I always make stand up and like show themselves. It's a whole different couple. And so that's exciting. Point is, you can find love and the answers to all of your, esoteric questions at our events. You should come to them all.
Can you learn how to say the current vice president's name?
Is that what we're starting with?
Let's go for it.
Kamala. Her name is Kamala. This is not hard, y'all. So the first, article that we're going to talk about, I don't even have it pulled up, but there was a lot of chatter in the news this week. This has all been ongoing, but there was a particular episode of a show where a woman, apparently a congresswoman,
Nancy Mace,
mispronounced, Kamala Harris's name, and was called out for being racist. So Kamala Harris is part Black, and her name is unique, right? I mean, that's not a name that you've heard before. And I texted the group and said, you guys might be surprised to know I am going to stand with the Democrats on this one. So hot take, here we go. I am a Democrat. I'm just kidding. But
not if there's anything wrong with that.
I mean, we can talk about that.
Well,
but yes. I have for many months, I've had a problem with this. In fact, you may have heard me correct people on the show when they say like Kamala or Kamala or whatever. Her name is Kamala. It is not hard to say correctly. So I have two problems with this. The first problem is that I just think it's rude to not say someone's name correctly if you can. So here's the thing. There are a lot of names around the world that are very difficult for us to say because they're not languages that we speak easily, right? So if someone gives you, like, I'm constantly trying to learn the names of the ladies at my nail salon, and they're mostly Vietnamese. And they're pretty difficult to say because it's just a whole different, like, tonally different language, right? In fact, I'd say thank you every time I'm there in Vietnamese, and they all laugh, and then they say it again back to me as if it's so different. I'm like, no, that's what I just said. That's the same. But in their minds, they're like, oh, that's so cute. She tried, but it's terrible. I'm sure it sounds terrible. So there's names we can't pronounce very well, and that would be understandable, but this is not one of them. And I thought of an example last night when I was falling asleep. Is the name Miguel. It's a Latino name. It's Michael in Spanish. Miguel. If someone says, hi, my name is Miguel, we can make those sounds with our voices. Mm-hmm. You can say that name. I can say that name. Most Western white people can say the name Miguel, even though it's a different language, because it's sounds that our mouths can make easily. Kamala is one of those names. You can say it. So this is my problem with it, is if you can and you don't, it's A, rude, and B, yes, because it is unique and because it is attached to a different, if you want to call it race or ethnicity, a different culture, different people group. The fact that you're saying it wrong, it is a certain kind of laziness that is now attached to race, whether you like it or not. I mean, so I don't think that lady is a racist. And by the way, I listen to all these political pundits that say her name incorrectly, and it drives me crazy. And I don't think that they are racist, but I don't think they're doing themselves any favors on that front.
It's kind of back to the whole, like, how winsome should I be to tell people about Jesus? It's like, is it like a don't cause unnecessary offense if you can sort of help it? Yeah. Okay, but I kind of fought back against this in the group chat because, first of all, like, she really, even though she's been vice president, she was a senator, I mean, she wasn't this front and center for a very long time. Even as vice president, she was sort of a entity. She just kind of show up from time to time and do silly things. And so it's only recently that there's been this, like, say the name right, say the name right, say the name right. And for a lot of people...
Not from me. It's been bugging me the whole time, but keep going.
Yeah, but I mean, like, so, like, there is this, like, institutional memory or, like, even personal memory of, like, well, you see the name and it looks like Kamala, so that's just what you say. So then, like, every time you say it, it gets reinforced. So to change that habit, it takes a while. Yeah. And so now that people are trying to change it, and, it's like, show a little grace, So I would say...
Oh, for sure, grace.
Yes. But what it shows, what it demonstrates to me, that there's a lot of thin skinness on the other side, where it's like, if you don't say my name right, I'm going to cry. Well, go ahead and cry. I don't care. Like, life is tough. You want to be the most powerful person in the history of the earth, and see, I don't care. Like, people have called me, McClanahan. In fact, as you were talking, you know what I thought?
What?
I have something in common with Kamala.
What?
Our names have an A every other letter there for us a while. McClanahan.
You're the same.
Yes, we're the same. But McClanahan's like a really easy way to say, but every day people get it wrong. Every day. Like every time my name is said, Evan. I become Yvonne. I become Even. I become Ethan. I become Ian. It's right there. It's just.
I'm Sarah Stone, so I'm always Sharon Stone. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah. Anyway, so, but it's like, to me, to have these kind of what do you call it when people speak on behalf of your campaign?
I don't know. Representative?
Yeah. There's a word for it, but anyway, when they're out there and they're basically saying it's racist, now you're taking this to a whole other level. So my question is, not being familiar with the name Kamala, not being familiar with anyone else on earth named Kamala, maybe there is someone, but it's a first, so there should be a little bit of grace there. Yeah. Is it racist against black people or Indian people? Because she is half Jamaican and she is half...
I guess I'd have to ask Indian. Where the name came from.
But doesn't that matter? Because, like, if you're accusing someone of racism, which is the worst thing you can say about somebody today, and you're saying that about a sitting, just reelected, congresswoman who was actually at one point a never-Trumper and is now fully on board with Trump. She was one of the 8 people, I think, who voted to impeach McCarthy. Anyway, she's taken some controversial votes. She clearly wants to be out on the stump, for Trump. And so to call her a racist because she's mispronouncing a name even if she's doing it intentionally to get under their skin, which worked brilliantly, by the way, which is a political tactic. I mean, so it's like all's fair in love and war. But like, which race
but then
is
call
she
it
hating?
war. That's my thing.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't think it's racist to say it wrong the first time or the second time or maybe the third time. But if you know how it's said, if I know it's McClanahan, and this is silly because I have Scottish roots too, but say I hated Scottish people. I'm like, the McClunahoons or whatever. I don't know. This sounds so dumb. Like who can't say McClanahan? Anyway.
A lot of people.
But if I'm doing it like to be obtuse, then I'm at least being a jerk. But because it has ties to some kind of cultural roots, it is offensive to those cultural roots. Yeah. So maybe the word racist isn't right, but it's beyond lazy. Yeah. It becomes rude. Yeah. And that's my thing about the Kamala thing.
It may have been rude, but it's like, it's CNN. It's it's political commentary. And so it's like, call it rude. Go ahead. I think if they had said, that's rude. Yeah. Like, okay. But is Kamala is it a black name? Is it an Indian name? It looks actually Indian because Indians have a lot of words where you have a vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant, But so it's like, so who exactly does Nancy Mace hate? That's what I would want to know. Like, who does she harbor this paranoid-esque, hatred toward one particular group because they're the vermin of the society and they need to be eliminated?
No, I don't think she is a racist.
I know, I know. But it's like, but to me, it's inexcusable to call someone racist unless you know that they are. I mean, because it is such a low blow to the character, and it's a total ad hominem attack to. Whereas you should be having a policy debate about whether it's a good idea to have, price controls or, all the other things we talked about on the previous episode. Like that's what we should be talking about. Like, what is she going to do for immigration? Like, what is she going to do? What,
And I think you cede ground then because you give the other side this foothold of whether it's racist or not. Now they're in that territory.
Right. Now you're arguing about her name instead of like the policy. So like you've lost ground. I agree with that.
Like I get that in politics people use mockery. I mean, how many like names has Trump given people? Like Sleepy Joe, Crooked, everybody's crooked. I think Kamala is cute, if you want to use like funky nicknames to do the mocking thing, well, that's a whole other conversation we can have about should politics be like that. But make it actual mockery. Don't don't butcher their name. To me, that's just it's like childish. Yeah.
It is. I will say this though. When you're on a set like that, I mean, this is a set almost equivalent to CNN. Yeah, basically. We have a camera, we have microphones, we have
a bunch of people back there making sure the cameras are right.
Yes. No, actually, we need a producer. So if anyone just has time to kill and they want to produce the show, great. That's why you only get one camera look at this every single time. So we stick the camera and turn it on. Anyway, but like in that moment where you're fighting for space, because there's 6 people on a 7-minute segment, right? And the commercial breaks always come like this, and you're trying to get your points out fast. Surrogate, that's the word I was looking for. They're surrogate for the campaign. So like when you're trying to do it, like you just go with that institutional memory of how you say her name. And then it's like, so I tend to show some grace on that. I tend to think it shows that the campaign has very thin skin. I think she herself has very thin skin. She looks, my own personal judgment, the DNC has been this week, and I watched some of the speech last night. She looks very uncomfortable. She looks like she doesn't want to be there, but that's just my own bias, or
she very well might not want to be,
But yeah, so okay, so I agree with you. I do think it's rude to do that. Yeah. I don't think it should be done. I think, as a very famous first lady once said, when they go low, we go high. That's what we saw at the DNC this week. It was a lot of high ground, a lot of moral high ground.
Oh my gosh.
And
sarcasm, friends, sarcasm.
Yeah, but so no, I do think that and as Christians, of course, Nancy Mace was the congresswoman who, and anyway, she was I will say this for her. She was the first woman to ever graduate from the Cadet Academy in South Carolina. Oh my gosh, I can't think of the name. The Citadel. I think it's called Citadel. Anyway, so she's a pretty tough cookie. I'll give her credit for that. But
by the way, speaking of tough cookies, just real quick, because you said something earlier, and I came back at it in the group text, but I want to say it here. Yeah. Just because something doesn't bother you doesn't mean it's not wrong. Because almost nothing really bothers you. Like, you have pretty thick skin, and if people say your name incorrectly, they could say it probably 20 times incorrectly, and you'd be like, whatever. It would bother me after my name is easy. Sarah. It's Sarah. Just say it right,
One who laughs.
But, yes, which actually is not great because she laughed in mockery of God. Yeah, I know. Okay. I prefer Princess.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if you know my name and you can say it correctly and you don't, that's rude. Whether I think it's rude or not, it's rude. That's my thing about this is like Evan McClanahan can all day long say, doesn't bother me, shouldn't bother her.
I know.
But it doesn't make it right.
No, I agree. And I wouldn't do that to somebody,
Anyway.
There is a great story. It's probably out there on YouTube. Years ago, before Jim Rome he's a sports commentator. He's done his own show for years. And so early on, he was like just a kind of rude, obnoxious, antagonistic guy, as a lot of sports bros are, right? He was interviewing a guy named Jim Everett, who was a quarterback of the Rams and then the Saints. And it was kind of a low budget show. Jim Rome was just starting out his career, and Jim Rome kept calling him Chris Everett.
Oh no!
Yeah, the female tennis player. And so it wasn't like it
wasn't just a little mishap. It was a whole different person.
And so there's a scene where Jim Everett is like, if you do that again, I'm going to throw the table away and we're going to go down. And he did. Yeah. So Jim Everett was like,
exciting.
Or Jim Rome was
I would watch Kamala take someone down.
Yeah. So
it's Kamala!
The table gets thrown off, the mics get thrown down, and Jim Rome gets pummeled. And anyway. So, no, it's rude. I agree. I do agree with that in principle. As Christians, I think we need to be better than that. But I do think that, if people get her name wrong for a while, hopefully we only have to maybe deal with her, if you will, for a while yet. Because I'm hoping she's not going to be elected, but that's just me.
It's not looking good, brother. But we'll see. We'll see.
So, but I do think that we have kind of in our brain, we have this line, and my line is like Kamala, but now it's shifting back to Kamala, so it's now instinctual.
This is called doing the work.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah, doing the work. Okay. Well, speaking of the DNC, one of the things that made news was there was a bus.
Yep.
They parked right out front. And it was to give men vasectomies and women abortion pills.
Do you mean birthing persons?
That's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
It's one of those lines in my brain where I say women. But anyway, so, and this was kind of hailed as like a good thing. Planned Parenthood was there to basically end human reproduction. Mm-hmm. And, these pills, if you don't know, they're basically up to 12 weeks of gestation or whatever in the womb. They can end that life. I should have had my little 12-week baby here with me. It's about 2 inches or 3 inches long, and so on and so forth. I use them. I hand them out to people from time to time. So anyway, that's what the chemicals that you take essentially dissolve. It's basically scalding and burning a human being to death in your own womb, and then that thing comes out of your body over a 2 to 3 day period. It's absolutely excruciating, but they were handing out those pills like it was candy.
They were handing out the pills, and apparently right next to that was a food truck and another carnival stand where you could get goodie bags. That in the goodie bags they had painkillers and swag to help you when you actually pass this thing. Ew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird because it's as bad as, I don't want any abortion at all, for any reason, but the old way, this is going to sound crazy for me because I'm not defending abortion at all. But a typical abortion takes about 5 to 10 minutes if it's a relatively, small baby. And as heinous as that is, the idea that what the left is championing now is this pill that basically takes that and makes it a 2 to 3 day process where the woman is essentially alone. Mm-hmm. And I just find that, and by the way, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have championed that very pill. That is what they said abortion pills should be available.
Hey guys, Sarah Stone here. Sorry to interrupt what I'm sure is a riveting podcast episode, but Theology by the Pint needs your help to continue providing these podcasts, offering our in-person events, and growing so we can bring thoughtful conversation and the hope of the gospel to a world that's increasingly walking away from church and from faith. Now that we're a 501c3 nonprofit, all donations are tax deductible, so we've crunched the numbers, and if each listener of this episode gave just $1 for each episode you listen to, we'd put a huge dent in our annual budget. So consider giving today. Go to theologybythepint.org/give and click the link to donate. Thanks so much, and now back to our show.
We don't have, in fact, Donald Trump just 10 minutes ago or so, or an hour ago, tweeted on or Truth Social or something, said, women are going to love my policies on reproductive rights. So we don't have really a pro-life
candidate.
candidate, and we've talked about that ad nauseum, and it's upsetting, but it is what it is. So,
well, I found this Planned Parenthood bus at the DNC like so gross, and it made me think of like, so conservatives have been saying for a while that abortion is like the sacrament for the left, and to me, this was like sort of the crowning jewel of that idea. So I'm currently teaching a Bible study about Revelation, and we just came through Revelation 17, which is like the trickiest section of all scripture maybe. And it talks about like this whore or harlot. And it talks about that she's holding this cup filled with abominable things. And then it uses the word abomination or abominable like several times. So one of our discussion questions was like, what are abominable things? So I just went into scripture and I pulled 3 passages, one from Proverbs 6, which is, there are 6 things, 7 that are detestable to the Lord, abominations, whatever. And they're like things that we all do, by the way. Like everybody listening has done them today. But in that verse and the verse from Deuteronomy and the verse from Leviticus, the 3 I pulled about abominable things, all 3 have something about shedding innocent life. That it is an abomination, meaning that it is antithetical to God's character. Like God is about life, that is about death. And so, the Deuteronomy and Leviticus ones are about burning babies for Molech, which is a false god. I would say is a demon, is a prince of it's a fallen angel. It is, you could think of it like Satan, one of Satan's people, one of his lower gods, asks that of people. And here we are, thousands of years later, sacrificing babies to the god of whatever you want to call it, secularism, leftism.
Personal autonomy. I mean, Oprah said on the stage, like, you can't have the American dream if you don't have autonomy over this.
Have you seen the response of it's a black lady that does a response where she says, I am an American and I was meant to be aborted and I have now lived she said the American dream is different than the American story. I thought that was a great distinction. She talked about things like slavery, like that are a embarrassing part of our story. They're part of our story, but they're not the dream.
Yeah.
Death is the story. The dream is life.
Yeah. My wife, who got one of those Pontiac G6s, she was in the audience that day when Oprah gave out the cars. So,
oh, that's right.
Yeah. And I still can't stand Oprah. So even I cannot be bribed, even with a $30,000 car, okay? Which is long gone, by the way. But she reminded me that Oprah was like molested. Is this known?
I think if Amanda said it, I believe it.
Yeah, I think so. Amanda thinks that she had sort of forced abortions in her young years as a result of incest, and I can't say for sure that's true. That kind of rung a bell.
Yeah. Well, don't try Googling it because you won't find it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I understand that people have personal issues and histories and things like that. And they brought people on the stage at the DNC this week who are like, victims of rape or incest. And they're like, we needed this so that we can get on with our lives and all of that. But I will say this. Let's say that Oprah was in some way abused. This is getting pretty dark. But and so what Oprah is saying is, I could not have built my media empire and done all the good, in theory, that I've done with that media empire if I had to be a mother as a teenager, to a child that I didn't want,
Yeah.
And so then then it's kind of a question of like, well, what is the life of a person really worth? Is it worth a $3 billion valuation? Is it worth all the land you're buying in Maui? Is it worth, all the propaganda or the good that you've done through your talk shows? And
I would say she's done a fair amount of evil through her talk shows too. But
for sure.
Anyway.
And there's lots of, I mean, she was close to the Weinsteins. She was, she was very connected to some not so good people. But, it's like, that's a question that I think the idea, I mean, even is the American dream itself so valuable that it's worth killing a child for, and that's essentially what she seemed to be saying. Which, by the way, I don't even accept the concept that she was saying of the bodily autonomy. I mean, because it's another human being's body inside your body, and like the fact that you would want to kill it is very dark.
Yeah.
And you misunderstand the whole argument. So
you don't. First of all, you don't even own your own self. The Lord owns you.
God owns you. Yes.
But even if you somehow can say that you do, you don't own a whole other body inside of you.
Right.
Yeah. The whole thing is really dark. And I do just want to say, I mean, there's a difference between thinking that abortion is pure evil and wanting to fight against it and I mean, we would never say, as Theology by the Pine, any of our leadership would never say that this is outside the reach of God's grace and redemption. There are people that we all know and love that have had abortions, and will. And it's not some unforgivable sin, but it is also an abomination.
Yeah. What I would like is that we could have honest conversations around that topic. We've done a lot of shows about it, so I'm not going to say much about it now. But it's really frustrating. As an example, now that school is back in session, I've been outside doing my best to propagandize, the college students here in the neighborhood. And
the church where Evan is a pastor is right across from a community college.
Yep. So a guy comes up, because I do a pro-life display, and, with the hopes of talking to people. And when they come up to my table, by the way, they might be gone in 15 seconds or 15 minutes. I have no idea. So I'd get to the point real fast. So he says, kind of, what are you doing? And I say, I'm basically pro-life and, just trying to show people what life is like in the womb, because I use these little fetal models that are very lifelike, and people think they're like bizarre and like, what are you doing? So, and instantly, like the first thing he says is, what about rape and incest?
Yes.
And I'm like, bro, can we even have a conversation? Like, can we lay some groundwork here? And I tried to say, well, if I like Trump has done, among other things, but if I meet you with the rape and incest, well,
can we then have a conversation?
Will you agree with me about all the others? And
right.
Like, well, and so he's like, well, what percentage? And I gave him a number, and you didn't believe it. Well, I can't, I don't know. I'll have to do research. It's like, well, let's have a hypothetical.
Yeah.
Like, but one of the questions I always ask about that, is what is rape?
Yeah.
Because
that's a whole other conversation.
Well, it is, but it's important because people just throw out these exceptions, but then there are ways to think about it that involve, but we're not going to go there. But I just think that I wish the Republican Party was the family party. They're alienating the pro-life movement, which is very stupid. Maybe it's because he's trying to get RFK Jr.'s endorsement, and he's obviously very pro-abortion, and so maybe there's this bizarro world kind of coming together. But on the other hand, I don't like it, but I don't know it's the worst thing either, because what seemed to be happening since Roe is that the Republicans play acted like World Wrestling Federation style, that they were for life, but they really never did anything. They never pushed the limits. They never, got anything to the Supreme Court until, Dobbs. And the Democrats are just increasingly, pro-abortion. So I wish that there was a party in America that was unabashedly pro-family. That's, interestingly though, this is the duality of the Democrat Party. One day it's we will do everything we can to make sure you can abort your kid. Everything. We'll do everything we can. The next day it's, J.D. Vance said a $5,000 child tax credit, $6,000.
Yeah.
It's whoa, well, which is it?
Are we celebrating children? Or, yeah.
We making it easier to have kids, or easier to kill them, or just whatever, or both? I mean, do we have any kind of coherent vision where we think something to the God said life is good, so life is good, so we'll proceed from there? No, It's just everything's for grabs.
Well, we'll celebrate the autonomy and the sort of carnival nature of this food truck that's been turned into a death truck that's going to come in. But then on the way here, I thought, well, since I know we're going to be talking about this, I want to know how many were handed out, how many men got vasectomies, how many women. And I tried Googling it. You can't find those numbers.
Right. Well, I heard there was a waiting list, which doesn't say much because it was a bus. But
well, have you ever been to a food truck? They take forever. I saw a Babylon Bee thing about a guy that's I thought I was getting a burrito, and then I got my, I got snipped, and now I can't have babies. Anyway, that's dark humor, but
I do think there is a difference still between the two parties on the issue. It's not as clear as I would like, because it's the left goes more left, and then the right just goes more left. Whereas there could be a really better example where we say we want more children, we need more children. Here are the policies that will help you have a child.
Yes.
That will help you buy a home for the child. I mean, one very basic thing is, if you look at the price of a starter home and how it's changed in the last 10 to 20 years, it's doubled. It's incredible what's happened. So what are the policies to make timber or lumber more affordable? Timber? Yeah. Anyway, but what are the policies to make shingles more affordable? I know that people don't think about those things, but someone has to build a home.
Well, this is why people should listen to the podcast you guys did yesterday.
Yeah.
About economics.
Yeah. So anyway, it's frustrating, but it's I don't know. It just seems dark. It's the Darth Vader, shuttle drives in, and it's we will make sure you never can procreate ever again. And actually, I think I think vasectomies can be defensible in certain circumstances. But you think of like young people going to these things, and it's just weird. So,
but the only, I mean, this isn't good news. It's not a silver lining, but at least there's a certain raw honesty from the Democratic Party saying, hey, here's what we celebrate. We're going to just put it right in front of you so you can see. We're not even masking it anymore. We're saying the quiet part out loud. And so, like, take that into consideration when you vote, when you go to the battle box. I have to say it like that every time. Oh, sweet Joe Biden. Sorry.
I know we kind of miss him now, don't we? Yeah. Anyway, children are great. Have children. Have a family. It'll make you very happy. It'll be difficult, but it'll make you happy. And this other vision of like, I don't know, working at a company to do spreadsheets, and being happy that the company will help you pay to freeze your eggs so that you can have kids later, so that you can slave away during your most productive years. That's dark. Like that's not a vision. It's not Christianity. It's not a vision. So
we're actually going to be talking about all of that in January. That's our January event. It's like IVF, and birth control.
It's public. We can say that. Okay.
Yeah, we can say that. Yeah.
There was this was one of those timeline cleanse on Twitter the other day. It was for how they on Twitter now they can do like multiple videos. Like kind of in a square. Like 4 videos in a square.
I'll take your word for it.
So on
do you mean X?
Upper left was a meme of a kind of a trad woman saying, I don't know what men want. And then in the upper right, a woman said, men only want one thing.
Yeah.
And then in the bottom left was a absolutely adorable video of a young kid on the track with his dad who was exercising.
Yeah.
And this 3-year-old boy was running around without a shirt on. He's like, Dad, I want to run with you every day, and one day I'm going to get lumps on my body, meaning like muscles. Like one day I want to be like you. And can we do this twice a day?
Cute.
And it was just like the most, and then, I love you, son, and Dad, I love you. And it just like broke your heart, And
then, you guys, Evan does have one.
And then the bottom left was all the Chads, like the bearded guys, was saying, this is the one thing they want. Right. So the women are saying the only thing men want is sex. And what the men are trying to communicate is, this is what I want. I want to have kids. I want to have a family, And like, I think there's a lot of truth in that. And it's like, that's the world, like we could communicate, but the world we're communicating is like through all the things, through the abortion, through the pornography, through the this, through the that. It's just total self-gratification, So anyway, the white pill is having a 3-year-old saying, Dad, I want muscles like you. My 3-year-old never said that. So, because I don't have any. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Need to go to the gym. Okay. Speaking of genders and things.
Yes.
You had an experience recently that was.
Yeah, I did.
Sad for you, I think. I don't know if that's the right word.
I mean, I wasn't shocked by it. So, my son has just started going to classes at a local university. And not just started. He's in his like sophomore and a half year. I don't know. I guess he's a junior. Anyway, and he's taking a sociology class, which on the text thread, one of our like professors was like, "Oh, that was your first mistake taking a sociology class." But I loved my sociology class when I realized I went to college a long time ago. But it's fascinating learning about how people think differently and how, people groups move and why and all that stuff. But on day 2, he sent me a picture of a slide and it was about all these, it was the symbols for gender, like the man is like an arrow and the woman's like a cross, coming out of the circle. Anyway,
I thought it was a plus sign.
It was my mnemonic growing up that it was a cross because I was like, there's more women at church. That was how I remembered it. It probably is a plus sign. And it probably has to do with X and Y chromosomes, right?
I have no idea.
I've
never understood them.
That's why one is
I didn't know which
Y
one was which.
attached and one's like an X attached. I don't know.
Yep.
You guys can Google that and learn about that. But it was a chart of those two plus 17 other quote genders. And they have all these like crazy things coming out of the circle and they're like a demi boy and a non-binary and all these crazy stuff. So my son sends me this and he's like, how crazy is this? And he said, nobody in the class even batted an eye. And then he sent that to a mutual friend of ours also, who then they got into a conversation and their conversation went very differently from my conversation with my son. And I thought it was noteworthy. So I passed it on to everybody that's in this text thread that people that come on the show talk about. And basically what it was this mutual friend, excuse me, said, well, that's some people think about it that way. And we as Christians, we just need to fight the urge to pick sides. We just need to understand that some people think about it the question that was sort of in the text thread was, is gender a construct? Because the teacher had said gender is a construct. And I actually agree with that. I think gender is a construct. We've constructed it. It is not something that, thousands of years ago people were talking about. There may have been an understanding that the way your, sex plays out in society is a different kind of concept. But using that word to mean that is relatively new. Anyway, so that was the conversation. And the response was, well, whether or not it's a construct, and it probably is, and it was around a long time, we don't need to pick sides, and we don't need to take a stance on this. We just need, as Christians, to just live and let live. And I was like, nope, I don't agree with that. Yeah. And I don't think the Bible agrees with that. I don't think the story of Scripture is that we just need to sit around and let society do whatever it does. I think there are so many warnings in Scripture about paying attention to and fighting up against false teachings. You think about Joshua saying, choose you this day who you're going to serve. The entire Bible, I would say, is a story of two teams, two kingdoms, right? And you have some choice about which one you align yourself with. This cosmic duality, right? There's the kingdom of Jesus. There's the kingdom of the devil, or you call it the world, or evil, or whatever. And I think this understanding that gender is this fluid, constructed, whatever you want it to be, I think that's in the kingdom of evil. Mm-hmm. So I'll just say it. And so I think we actually do need to fight up against that. I don't think we need to be ugly, which goes back to the whole say her name right, right? But in a winsome, kind way, we can say, that's just not true. Yeah. And the construction of gender, if you go back to the John Money thing, it failed on its first attempt. Yeah. I mean, if you Google the John Money story, you will cry. I mean, it's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so those are my thoughts.
That's definitely a white pill, or maybe it's a red pill in the sense that, right, there is this thing called reality, and there is good and there is evil, and we are to choose the good.
Yeah.
And
Christians are not meant to be doormats or just agree to disagree and everyone get along. I mean, we do a lot of that at our events when it's about non-essential things. We say, hey, you can be an infant baptizing guy and I can be a believer baptizing girl and we can be friends. But when it comes to things like the nature of who we are, God made us male and female. I think that's something we get to take a stance on because it seems to be really important to the Lord. Yeah.
Our text for Sunday is from Ephesians 6, you're fighting powers and principalities and all that. And, it's the armor of God, text in Ephesians 6. So one of the commentaries I read, and I kind of stole this line, is that, you're in spiritual warfare. You don't get to choose, you don't get to sign up for service to go fight, or you don't get to be a pacifist and avoid it. You're in it whether you like it or not. And that seems to be what Paul is saying. It's here, and it comes in many forms. And so the tearing down and the confusion of the creating of nonsensical and self-contradictory genders, quote unquote, is just it's an offense to the truth. So I would encourage Christians to definitely resist and fight back.
And speaking of principalities, that word is really interesting when you think of municipality, principality. It's a realm that is overseen by something, and it has the word right in it. It's overseen by a prince. But those principalities it's talking about in Ephesians 6, they're not run by the Prince of Princes. They're not run by Jesus. They're run by the princes of Satan. Yeah. So they are de facto demonic. Yeah. And so I think sadly right now, public universities are demonic principalities. I don't mean that everything that happens. I'm willingly sending both my kids to college. I want them to get a college degree. Yeah. So, but I do think it is an area where there is just a constant barrage of wrong thinking, false teaching coming our way, and we have to be prepared for it.
I think it's true of a lot of our institutions where, behind the power behind these powers, are not explicitly Christian. And when we had our Satanism event, this was one of my points, is that it's if it's not explicitly Christian, then it's, more or less the other side. Yeah. There can be some, I don't think there's any ultimate neutrality, but there can be some neutrality in certain things that are, sure. I think my public school when I was a kid was fundamentally neutral. You know, but I don't think that's true
anymore.
I think it's a lot less likely to be true today. So we just have to discern and, understand the situation we're in and all of that, and help someone who's confused. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. Like, if gender's not a real thing, then how can you think you're the other one? I mean, it's like...
And it's self-defeating.
Yeah,
philosophically.
It really ends up self-defeating, but...
Yeah.
Agreed. Well, last article, this is sort of interesting. Let me see. I got to pull it up.
Do we need an Indiana Jones clip to tee this up? Can you embed that? You've chosen poorly.
So it's about the Holy Grail, and I don't know what oh, there we are. Okay, so it's from CNN, of all places. They all say they've got the Holy Grail, so who's right? It was written by Julia Bucky of CNN. And let me just read a little bit of it. Yeah. It says, wherever you go, the experience is usually the same. You enter a church or a cathedral, and an ecclesiastical hush descends. You admire the architecture, the artworks, the centuries of history and of faith that have stood the test of time. And then you enter a special chapel or museum where the holiest of items resides. Behind a glass case stands the stuff of legend, the Holy Grail. Or is it? What makes this cup the Holy Grail, but not another? In Europe alone, there are said to be around 200 cups, each thought to be the Holy Grail, the cup used by Jesus at the Last Supper. And believers will flock to them and pray over them, but which is the real Grail, and does it even exist? And so the article sort of goes on, but I learned a lot just in those few words. First of all, I didn't know there was any church that said it had the Holy Grail.
I didn't either. Yeah.
That's how they made the whole movie. Because
you're searching for the one that is nowhere right now.
And there's the Knights of the Templar who are guarding the thing and drink. Yeah, you drink poorly, you drink wisely, and your face melts and the whole thing. And so it's like I honestly didn't think anyone was claiming to have the Holy Grail at all. So that was a newsflash, much less 200.
Yeah. I assume these are Catholic churches.
Yes. Okay. Yes, they must be. So
it's a relic-y sort of thing. So.
Yeah. So it's like, but from a Protestant point of view, like, well, who cares? Like, what does it matter what cup you drank out of it? That's not the point.
Right. You're not Jesus. The cup isn't magical.
Yes, the cup has no properties at all. It's just a cup. It's just like this nice theology.
It's theology on tap.
It's theology on tap. Yes. But theology by the pint glass here. It's just a vessel by which you drink the wine. The wine, of course, we would say the Last Supper is the do this in remembrance of me. Jesus is commanding us to have this meal we call Eucharist or the Lord's Supper or communion, when we gather and remember him and so on and so forth. And we would say the wine either is symbolically representative of the blood of Christ and the sacrifice, or Jesus is in with and under the bread and wine, or in transubstantiation. But either way, it's like the stuff in the cup
is the important stuff.
Yeah. So
it was tiered. The person saying it is the most important. The blood/wine inside is the second most important. The cup is just there to get it in.
Yeah. So it's like, why, but it does bring about just a whole conversation around, like, why is it that we put faith in these relics, in maybe icons, but, the snippets of John the Baptist's hair or the finger bones or the pieces of the cross? Even Luther in his day said if you added up all the pieces of the cross, you could build a church out of it or something. That wasn't what he said, but it was something like that. The idea being that, there are all these reliquaries and claims, and it's just, just outright superstition. And so anyway, I just thought it was interesting that, there was any church, any claim to the Grail. I didn't know there was one, much less 200. Then there was kind of related to that was this interesting AI version, or basically the Shroud of Turin, using AI to create the image. Yeah. So we had some fun with that.
Tell us all what you are calling it.
Well, I said it's like swipe right Jesus because
he's quite handsome.
Yeah, I don't know if you swipe left or right, but it's
swipe right for,
and he's not wearing a shirt. I mean, it's and like if you are a believer in the shroud. Okay, and like you do have the negative.
And we have done an episode on this. If you go way back in our history with Gary Habermas.
Yeah, Gary Habermas. Yeah,
anyway,
one of our
keep
bigger
going.
names. Yeah, so like the X-ray, if you will, the negative image of it doesn't look like what AI created. So I'm not sure. I don't know what they're doing. Are they taking the negative image and then making it come alive?
I guess we'd have to pull up an article and see.
There is this one great YouTube channel where they'll do this with like say all the portraits of George Washington or all the portraits of his, the French lady. Let them eat cake.
Queen, don't remember.
She wasn't a queen. Was she a queen? Was she? Anyway. Oh my gosh. Kirsten Dunst made a movie about her, but I can't remember her name.
Elizabeth, Charlotte. I don't know. Someone famous. Either way.
So anyway, so they bring him to life with AI. And that's kind of cool. You know, like that's what they really would have looked like and all that. But it's like the shroud, I don't know. It doesn't look quite right. But it's like, who cares? No, I actually think the shroud is a lot more interesting than these other relics, because the difficulty of reproducing the image on the shroud, and therefore, like, maybe it was produced by kind of radiation or a burst of light or something like that. So I actually think the shroud could be legit.
Marie Antoinette, by the way. It was bugging me.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
My brain isn't working. So
I agree about the shroud thing being seemingly more plausible. Although I got in trouble a couple of years ago for saying that on social media, that I thought there was some plausibility to it. Everyone's like, oh, you can't believe that and be Protestant. Like, oh, calm down. Anyway, it's not like I think it's the proof we all needed this whole time or something. But the Holy Grail thing, what's interesting is, I mean, I watched the Indiana Jones movie, and the deal in there is that it brings youth, right? Because Jesus was resurrected, and so something about that cup means it brings like new life. Mm-hmm. I mean, Jesus was resurrected because he was God, and God defeats evil. Yeah. I'm like, okay, which is death. But I think part of the relic worship and obsession is the same thing that causes conspiracy theories, because they're fun. They're mysterious. They're mysterious on a supernatural level, which even this word supernatural lately, I'm wondering if I want to keep even using that, but that's another story for another day. But they're a puzzle, and so they're like fun for our mind, and they're like a connection to the other that could be. This is why, like, people that aren't even religious that get into conspiracy theories, I think it's partly because it's like, well, what if there are aliens, right. Or what if there are powers that are really important that are behind closed doors, like pulling the levers of, all this kind of stuff. Oh, there definitely are. And that's fascinating. And if you can be a part of that by following the breadcrumbs and piecing it together, then you have some special knowledge. I think this is where Gnosticism probably kind of comes from internally. People want to have special knowledge. You want to piece something together. You want to like put the puzzle together. It's exciting. And we've lived long enough to know that sometimes those things actually turn out to be true. The big secret that everyone's like, oh, no. It's like, oh, it really was that thing. Yeah. So. But a lot of what you just described in terms of like, it's this totem almost to the other world. Yes. It has properties. Totem's a great word. Like, that's like an idol. An idol fits all those same categories. And so that's why when the Protestants, to our Catholic friends, sorry, but when the Protestants accuse a lot of idolatry going on in the Catholic Church, not just with the statues of Mary, but it's all these things, I think every Catholic church has to have a relic in it. Like, but you're in a Lutheran church, you have icons. Yeah. How's that different? I think you can, I don't have it in our church. I personally have some icons, but when I say icon, I mean like a picture. What's an example for our listeners? They technically consider it a writing, but an image of Jesus, or Mary with child, or with any of the saints, or like it could be a statue. It could be anything that's like a representation. I'm not opposed to imagery. So as Lutherans are not opposed to religious artwork, unlike some of our Calvinist friends. I'm not opposed to a crucifix, because those things happened. I mean, God made himself known. And so I think God himself, if it's a violation, I do think it's a violation to try to depict God the Father or the Spirit in some way. But even then, you might argue that he did that through the dove at the baptism of Jesus and things like that. So interesting. I don't think that's wrong. I think it's wrong if you treat it like an idol. I think it's wrong if you talk to an icon or pray before it or kiss it. Yes. And you hope that act can bring has like magical power. Yeah. Yeah. And so I think I do think this gets to kind of the heart of the Protestant faith, or the Protestant claims that faith alone is sufficient, that we don't need these external things that we can touch. It actually reminds me of another kind of culture war thing. Remember when we talked about the difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation? Mm-hmm. That's kind of the difference. It's one is there's like you're taking it on and you get something from it, and the other one is like you look at artwork. Like if you go to the art museum right now and you look at that beautiful painting of Solomon making that choice with the women, it does something. It's appreciating the story. It's appreciating the story behind the story. But there's a difference between wanting it to do something for you, right, and appreciating something. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, for sure. And one of the classic books is B.B. Warfield's Counterfeit Miracles. And one of the things he does in that book, it's over 100 years old now, but he's one of the great Calvinist thinkers of the 20th century. And one of the things he does is he looks at the claims of the miraculous at Lourdes. Lourdes, France, is where there was an apparition of Mary, and so people flock there as a pilgrimage site.
and they claim to be healed. And he basically said, if you look at the number, and this was in the early 1900s, if you look at the claims of spontaneous healings among non-believers in hospitals, which do happen for whatever reason, and the number of spontaneous healings as a result of going to Lourdes and praying to that apparition of Mary, it's lower at Lourdes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So spontaneous healings happen, and there's no connection to these places. So the problem is when you need a miracle to and this is my critique of the charismatic movement. This is my critique of Mormonism.
I was going to say it sounds a lot like Bethel.
Yeah. When you need these other things to have a special power. Yeah. And Christ alone is not enough. The scripture alone is not enough. You end up chasing some pretty dark rabbit trails, and you end up not believing in Jesus.
I was going to say, or being and prosperity gospel too. If the thing doesn't work, then you throw the whole baby out with the bathwater. Yeah.
So when we talk about like the sufficiency, I mean, this is the whole argument of the Reformation, which is that Catholics would agree that faith, for example, was necessary and grace was necessary, but our argument was about their sufficiency, that these things are sufficient for saving faith, for salvation, for the forgiveness of sins, etc. Yeah. And the scripture is also sufficient. It has sufficient, it's necessary, but it's also sufficient in terms of our information about God or what we can know about God. And so to chase pieces of the cross or, Holy Grails, it's like, that's actually spiritually dangerous. It might actually be blasphemous. It might actually be a sign of unbelief.
Yeah, interesting.
So stop praying to the hair of Saint Elizabeth Mary Ann Seton, or whatever other saint you've got. Like thinking it's going to do any good.
But if you want to give money to Theology by the Pint, you probably will have a better mansion in heaven.
Probably. So yes, it'll be 4 bedroom with 3. So, okay, where can people find you, Sarah?
theologybythepint.org. We have a leadership page. You can read all about the beliefs and ministry of all our leaders and board members. And you can see about our events, all the good stuff.
theologybythepint.org, in case you didn't catch that. I'm Evan McClanahan. I'm the pastor at First Lutheran. You can see me there at flhouston.org. Until next time, hope you enjoyed this 2-parter. We encourage you to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed.